Welcome, the Lord's chosen. Some eyes don't just see, they study your existence. They've been tracking your rhythm, decoding your silence, and replaying your reactions like a movie on loop. Every scroll, every pause, every flicker of hesitation has been logged somewhere in a digital vault you'll never be invited into. Fun fact: the average human is recorded over 300 times a day without even realizing it. Comforting, right? Almost makes you want to wave at the nearest camera just to remind them who's really performing. But here's where it gets unsettling. The watchers aren't satisfied anymore. Data isn't enough. Screens don't scratch the itch. They want proximity, a pulse, a presence, a face-to-face. Maybe they want answers, or maybe they're hoping you'll blink first. And you felt it. That eerie awareness, that static in the air when eyes linger too long. It's not paranoia if the silence is scripted. Maybe they weren't just observing your life. Maybe they were rehearsing for their entrance into it. Welcome to the moment they finally step out of the shadows, where observation turns into interaction, and you realize the experiment was never about you being seen. It was about them being revealed. Number 1, they studied your movements, but never understood your motives. They tracked the rhythm of your days, noting when you moved, who you spoke to, what you did. They mistook activity for identity, thinking if they gathered enough of your patterns, they could decode your purpose. But what they never grasped is that your life wasn't built from habits. It was shaped by intention. You weren't just doing things, you were becoming someone. They looked at your actions like pieces of evidence, but never realized the case wasn't about behavior. It was about becoming. They saw your pauses as weakness, your distance as uncertainty, your change as instability. But those pauses were recalibrations, those quiet spells were strategy, and that change was growth they couldn't keep up with. They tried to read your story like a report, forgetting that some things aren't written in ink, but in experience. They measured your progress in numbers, unaware that evolution doesn't show up in statistics. It shows up in strength, in restraint, in the kind of calm that comes after being misunderstood too many times. Their mistake was thinking that surveillance equals understanding. Watching someone live doesn't mean you grasp their why. You can follow footsteps all day and still have no clue where the soul is walking. They were chasing shadows, mistaking data for depth. They thought control came from information, but they never saw how powerless they looked trying to analyze something that refuses to fit a formula. You can't chart purpose. You can't map destiny. The truth is, while they were studying you, you were studying yourself. You learned from the pressure they created. You became sharper, quieter, more precise. You realized that real power doesn't come from being watched. It comes from knowing who you are, even when eyes are on you. Their notes became meaningless the moment you stopped reacting to them. You didn't fight their observation, you made it irrelevant. They wanted to predict your next move, but you stopped moving in predictable ways. You stopped existing where they could define you. What they were monitoring wasn't your failure or success. It was their confusion. They thought they had insight into your life, when all they really had was front row seats to a mystery they could never solve. Number 2, observation became their addiction, not their advantage. What started as curiosity slowly turned into compulsion. They told themselves they were only keeping an eye on you, studying your choices, learning your patterns. But somewhere along the way, the line blurred. Watching you became their quiet obsession, their secret ritual. They couldn't look away because every time they did, they felt something slipping out of their control. You became the one variable they couldn't manage, the one equation that refused to balance. They thought they were collecting information, but what they were really doing was feeding a hunger for relevance. They watched you because they needed to feel close to what they couldn't become. Your growth exposed what they lacked, and instead of facing that, they tried to decode you, as if understanding your methods could make them capable of the same transformation. But addiction doesn't deal in logic, it deals in need. They needed to see you stumble to confirm the limits they placed on themselves. The problem is, you didn't. You evolved in silence, and their obsession deepened into frustration. They convinced themselves they had the upper hand, but it was you who held the power all along. While they wasted time watching, you were moving. They became spectators in their own story, trapped in cycles of comparison and envy. Every small win of yours was a withdrawal symptom for them. They couldn't stand to see you rise, yet they couldn't stop watching it happen. They told themselves they were keeping tabs, but really, they were losing themselves in your progression. Their obsession wasn't about you, it was about their emptiness. The more they watched, the more they were reminded of everything they hadn't done. Every time they analyzed your life, they were avoiding their own. And that's the thing about addiction. It consumes the addict, not the subject. Observation was supposed to give them clarity, but it only clouded their vision. Now they've built an identity around studying yours. Their addiction doesn't end when you disappear. It lingers because you became the mirror they can't stop looking into. They started watching to gain control, but ended up losing control to what they watched. And that's the real irony. They thought they were learning your moves, but all they really learned was their own obsession. Number 3, they confused silence with weakness, and that's where they lost the plot. They took your quiet for surrender because that's how they would have acted, loud, defensive, desperate to prove a point. But you didn't need noise to confirm your strength. You understood something they didn't. Stillness isn't the absence of power, it's the preparation of it. They were so busy reacting that they mistook your calm for defeat. They didn't realize you were listening, learning, and letting everything unnecessary burn itself out before you moved. They wanted a reaction because reactions are predictable. They feed off responses. They use them to measure control, but you gave them nothing. You denied them the satisfaction of seeing you rattled. That's when your silence became their problem. It unsettled them because they couldn't read it. When people can't label you, they start projecting their own fears onto your stillness. They began to fill in the blanks, and in doing so, they revealed themselves more than they realized. Your quiet didn't come from fear, it came from clarity. You stopped arguing because you knew the truth didn't need to shout. You stopped explaining because you realized they were never listening to understand, only to respond. Silence became your filter, separating what deserved your energy from what didn't. And while they thought they were outsmarting you, you were simply outgrowing them. Every second they spent trying to interpret your stillness, you were using that same silence to build resilience. Their mistake was underestimating how deliberate your restraint was. They thought inactivity meant indecision, when really it meant precision. You weren't doing nothing, you were doing what they couldn't, thinking before acting, healing before speaking, and strengthening before striking. They live in noise because they need validation. You found freedom in silence because you no longer did. By the time they realized your quiet wasn't emptiness but composure, it was too late. The silence they mocked became the barrier they couldn't cross. They thought they were waiting for your weakness to show, but your silence had already closed the chapter on their relevance. In the end, they learned the hard way that silence isn't a pause in the story. It's the sound of someone who's already won. Number 4, they wanted to predict you, but you're not a pattern. They kept thinking they could map you out, that if they studied your moves long enough, they'd find the formula that explains you. But every time they thought they had you figured out, you changed direction. You didn't move out of habit, you moved from intuition. They kept looking for cycles, but you don't repeat seasons, you outgrow them. You don't move in loops, you move in leaps. That's what unsettled them. They were waiting for you to circle back, not realizing you'd already stepped into a completely different dimension of yourself. They rely on prediction because prediction gives them comfort. They want to believe life can be managed through logic and control. But you don't live by logic. You live by alignment. You don't decide your next step based on what's safe. You move according to what's necessary for your growth. And growth, real growth, doesn't follow equations, it disrupts them. Every version of you they studied was already outdated by the time they analyzed it. They were calculating from history while you were operating from revelation. That's why they can't categorize you. Because you're not consistent in the way the world defines consistency. You don't evolve for applause, you evolve for truth. You don't chase trends, you follow timing. While they were trying to understand your methods, you were being moved by something they can't measure, calling. That's not something you learn, it's something you hear. And you heard it long before they realized they were the ones standing still. They built algorithms to predict outcomes, but you became an anomaly. The one thing that doesn't fit the system. Their logic collapses when it meets your faith. Their strategies fail where your surrender begins. They keep asking, what's their next move? When the answer is simple, you don't move next, you become next. You don't repeat, you reveal. You're not coded to be predictable. You're wired to be transformative. That's why they'll keep watching, analyzing, and misreading. Because your evolution isn't random, it's guided. And what's guided can't be graphed. They were searching for patterns, but what they found was proof that purpose doesn't repeat. It ascends. Number 5, they mistook proximity for power. They thought being near you meant they could understand or affect you. They believed that standing close to your orbit somehow gave them authority over your energy. But what they never realized is that closeness doesn't equal connection. They could study your surroundings, listen to your words, and still never comprehend your essence. They could touch your space, but never touch your spirit. You exist in a frequency they can't translate, no matter how near they stand. They confused visibility with access. Just because they can see you doesn't mean they can sense you. They don't understand that real influence happens beneath the surface, in thought, in intention, in vibration. You've learned to guard your energy in plain sight. You can sit next to someone and still be galaxies away in consciousness. That's what frustrates them. They think they're included, but they're only observing. They thought they were part of your circle, but they were only spectators, mistaking your silence for invitation. They wanted to believe they had leverage because they knew your story, your habits, your movements. But knowledge without alignment is useless. You can't manipulate what you don't match. You can know someone's path and still never walk it. They mistook information for influence, not realizing that your growth is powered by something unreachable, inner peace, divine timing, unshakable direction. They keep trying to pull strings in a play they were never cast in. You've learned that real boundaries aren't made of distance but of energy. You could share a room, a project, even a memory, and still remain untouchable. They can observe your world without ever altering it. Their presence doesn't shake your foundation because they never built it. They can whisper your name, study your reactions, analyze your silence, but they can't steer your outcome. You're not powered by their approval or attention. You're powered by purpose. In the end, they'll realize that proximity gave them nothing but perspective. They were close enough to witness transformation, but too far to participate in it. They wanted control, but all they got was a front-row seat to evolution. They'll learn the hard truth. Being around you doesn't mean they're within reach. It only means they're close enough to see what they'll never command. Number 6, they gathered data, but you gathered depth. They stored moments, not meaning. They kept records of what you did, but never grasped why you did it. They collected screenshots, whispers, and timestamps as if proof could ever replace perception. They were obsessed with documentation, thinking that evidence equaled insight. But the truth is, their folders are full of facts without foundation, a compilation of moments stripped of the emotion that gave them context. They were gathering noise while you were cultivating understanding. You weren't trying to remember everything, you were trying to learn from it. While they were busy tracking your past, you were investing in your growth. You didn't need files to prove your progress. Your peace was your proof. You were learning the lessons that can't be screenshot or stored in a cloud. They can archive your words but not your wisdom, copy your gestures but not your grace, record your voice but never capture your vibration. That's the kind of encryption no system can crack, the kind written by evolution itself. They thought they had leverage because they held information, but information without interpretation is just clutter. They can recite your timeline, but they can't trace your transformation. They can reference your mistakes, but they can't understand the metamorphosis behind them. They see what happened, but they'll never know what changed within you after it did. And that's the kind of gap that no technology can close. You learn that data is shallow without depth. You can measure every metric and still miss the message. They gathered receipts, you gathered realization. They watched you move but missed the growth happening in silence. Their focus was external, yours was internal. They thought you were predictable because they had records, but evolution doesn't leave a paper trail. You became something their data couldn't define. Now their files look heavy and your spirit looks light. They're weighed down by details that don't deliver truth, while you're elevated by wisdom that doesn't need evidence. They can replay what they recorded, but they'll never recreate the consciousness behind it. That's the real divide. They stored information, you stored insight. They gathered everything they could about you, yet still missed the only thing that mattered. You know yourself, and that's a kind of knowledge no one can steal. Number 7, they forgot. The watched also watches back. They assumed they were the only ones observing, dissecting, and decoding. They believed they were hidden, operating from a distance where you couldn't sense them. What they never realized is that awareness doesn't need evidence. It feels energy before it sees action. You knew long before they knew you knew. You just didn't announce it. You let them believe they were undetected, not out of fear, but out of strategy. Power isn't about reacting. It's about knowing when not to. They thought they were invisible behind their screens, masks, and quiet manipulations. But there's something they never accounted for: the intuition of the aware. You don't need cameras or recordings to see through behavior. You can feel the shift when eyes linger too long. You can sense the difference between curiosity and intrusion. They were watching you externally, but you were reading them internally. Every subtle move they made revealed their intent, and you learned to navigate it with quiet precision. You mastered the art of non-response, not because you were blind to their actions, but because you understood timing. You knew that exposure doesn't always come through confrontation. Sometimes it comes through silence that makes them reveal themselves. The more they thought they were unseen, the bolder they became, and the easier it was to trace their patterns. They showed you who they were without realizing they were performing under your awareness. That's what unsettled them, the moment they realized their gaze was being met. There's a kind of fear that strikes when the watcher feels watched. They started to sense your knowing, that calm acknowledgement that you were never the victim of observation, but the curator of it. You were collecting information too, not data, but discernment. You weren't studying their actions to strike back. You were studying their nature to stay free. In the end, they learned that perception is mutual. Every watcher eventually faces the awareness they underestimated. You were never a passive subject under surveillance. You were the mirror quietly reflecting everything they didn't want to see. And when they finally caught your gaze, they realized the truth. The watched had been watching back the entire time. Number 8. What they called investigation was really admiration in disguise. They started by pretending it was research, that they just wanted to understand you, analyze your moves, and figure out what made you tick. But underneath all that curiosity was something they couldn't say out loud. Fascination. You intrigued them. You irritated them. You reminded them of a strength they didn't have and a light they couldn't fake. They weren't studying you to expose you. They were studying you to feel something real. And that's the truth they'll never confess. They said they were just observing, but observation doesn't require obsession. It doesn't demand constant monitoring, replaying, and dissecting. That kind of attention isn't professional. It's personal. Somewhere along the line, their curiosity morphed into envy. You became the silent benchmark for everything they wished they could embody. Your endurance unsettled them, your resilience confused them, and your peace offended them. Instead of asking how you kept standing, they tried to find cracks that didn't exist. Because if they could prove you were flawed, they could excuse their own stagnation. The irony is they learned nothing useful from all their studying. They gathered details but not understanding. They saw the results but missed the discipline. They saw the glow but ignored the grind that produced it. What they thought was investigation became imitation. Little mannerisms, words, or ideas borrowed from you, disguised as coincidence. You were their secret inspiration, but they dressed it up as skepticism. It was easier for them to say they were analyzing you than to admit they admired you. You never asked for that attention, but your existence demanded it. Real strength has a frequency, and it pulls eyes that can't look away. They couldn't stand your calm in chaos, your ability to walk through fire without losing form. So they kept watching, hoping to catch the blueprint. But what they'll never grasp is that what makes you unbreakable isn't something that can be copied. It's something that's forged. So they'll keep calling it investigation, but you'll always know better. It's fascination they're too proud to name, because deep down, they don't want to expose you. They want to be you. They just can't admit that the only thing they're really searching for is your kind of peace. Number 9. They're about to realize the mirror watchers too. They've spent so long trying to analyze you, pick you apart, and expose what they believed were your flaws. But now, the moment they demanded has arrived, and it won't unfold the way they imagined. This face-to-face isn't a clash, it's a revelation. They thought they were coming to confront you, but what they'll really encounter is themselves, reflected through the clarity of your evolution. You've become the mirror they never wanted to look into. For months, they watched you like you were a mystery to solve. They built narratives, assumptions, and theories, each one designed to make them feel superior. But reflection doesn't lie. When they finally stand before you, not the version they created, but the reality of who you are, the illusion shatters. What they'll see isn't your rise, it's their stagnation. They'll see how much time they spent watching when they could have been growing, how much energy they wasted judging when they could have been healing. You won't need to speak a word. Your composure will be enough to expose everything they tried to hide from themselves. The reason they've always been unsettled by your presence is because you make them confront what they've avoided. Your strength highlights their excuses. Your peace exposes their chaos. Your authenticity reveals their pretense. You became a reflection of everything they abandoned in themselves: courage, integrity, persistence, self-awareness. That's why your existence alone feels like a threat. It's not your success that haunts them. It's their failure to match it. They thought they were watching you grow, but you were watching them decay. Every move they made out of envy or spite only deepened their own cracks. Now, standing in front of you, there's no projection left to hide behind. The mirror doesn't flatter, it reveals. And revelation is what they fear most, because it strips away the lies they've been living in. In this so-called confrontation, you won't need to defend yourself. The truth will do that for you. They'll realize too late that the mirror they were studying all this time was never about you. It was about them, their insecurities, their denial, their unfinished selves staring back from the reflection they can no longer escape. Number 10. They thought they were the architects, but you were the blueprint. They believed they were in control, shaping your path, defining your reputation, dictating your direction. In their minds, they were the ones designing the story, pulling the strings, and placing the pieces where they wanted them. But what they didn't realize is that every plan they made against you was already accounted for in the structure of your purpose. They weren't creating your outcome. They were fulfilling it. They thought they were writing your downfall, but all they did was contribute to your rise. Every setback they tried to stage became a setup for your breakthrough. Every word spoken against you added depth to your legend. They didn't understand that you were never reacting, you were unfolding. The things they tried to use to limit you only revealed how limitless you really were. They thought they were building walls, but you turned those same walls into foundations. Their problem was arrogance. They mistook interference for influence. They assumed power because they moved pieces, never realizing you were the design itself. The original draft they couldn't alter. You were built with intent. Your blueprint included both the betrayal and the breakthrough, both the silence and the spotlight. They were never the engineers of your story. They were simply laborers unknowingly carrying out the work that destiny had already drafted. It's poetic, really, the way their sabotage turned into structure. Every time they tried to block you, they marked your map. Every time they tried to silence you, they amplified your purpose. They were unknowingly proving what you've always known. Nothing they build can stand against what's already been written. They thought they were constructing an ending, but what they built was a monument. Now, as the dust settles, they'll start to see it clearly. Every move they made with malice became part of the masterpiece. Every attempt to control you revealed how little control they ever had. The irony is complete. They were so focused on building a narrative around you that they became characters in yours. They thought they were shaping your fate, but all along they were just tracing your design. A design too divine to be altered, too precise to be ruined, and too powerful to be theirs. Number 11. They can record behavior, but never replicate spirit. They can watch what you do, learn how you speak, and even mimic your rhythm. But what gives you power isn't your behavior, it's your essence. They can study your mannerisms and mirror your movements, but they'll always miss the life that fuels them. That spark behind your words, that unspoken conviction in your presence. That's not something you can download code or rehearse. That's something you're born with. Technology can recreate patterns, but not purpose. It can capture your image, store your voice, even simulate your personality, but it can't replicate authenticity. What makes you magnetic isn't what's seen, it's what's felt. You move from a place of meaning, not mechanics. Every decision, every silence, every look carries layers of experience, emotion, and awareness that no algorithm can process. You're not predictable data. You're living frequency. They can copy what you do, but they can't create from where you do. Imitation is easy. Embodiment is impossible. They can mimic your success, but not your sacrifice. They can repeat your phrases, but not your understanding. They can wear your style, but not your story. They want your results without your refinement, and that's why their version always feels hollow. What they fail to realize is that spirit gives behavior its weight. Without it, it's just noise. In a world obsessed with duplication, you remain the original. You can't be manufactured because your energy wasn't made. It was forged. You didn't come from imitation. You came from intention. That's why your presence can't be faked, and your impact can't be reversed. You're not data, you're depth, and depth can't be captured by devices or decoded by systems built to measure repetition, not revelation. Let them record, let them mimic, let them study. What they're chasing is the surface. What you carry lives beneath it. They can copy your rhythm, but they'll never feel your pulse. They can imitate your light, but they'll never hold your flame. Because spirit, your spirit, isn't information. It's ignition, and no machine, no mimic, and no mind trained to imitate can ever duplicate that. Number 12. Their surveillance became a summoning. What began as observation quietly turned into obsession. And that obsession became energy. The more they watched, the more attention they gave, and the more that attention began to work against them. They thought they were tracking you, but all they were really doing was feeding what they feared. Every glare, every whisper, every attempt to analyze your every move became a silent ritual that kept your name alive, your presence growing, your power multiplying. They didn't realize that energy, even negative energy, is still fuel when directed towards someone who knows how to transmute it. They studied you to contain you, not knowing they were amplifying you. Their focus acted like a magnet, pulling your purpose further into visibility. The same eyes that watched to limit you ended up enlarging you. What they meant as scrutiny became spotlight. What they intended as exposure became elevation. They thought attention gave them control, but attention is power, and you learned how to harness it. They were trying to drain your strength through constant observation, but you learned to convert pressure into presence. Every ounce of energy they threw your way, whether envy, malice, or curiosity, you turned it into motion. You absorbed it, refined it, and let it expand you. Their fixation only deepened your focus. Their attempts to dissect you only made you more defined. They kept circling you like vultures, not realizing they were orbiting a force they couldn't comprehend. That's how their plan backfired. What was meant to weaken you became the very thing that awakened you. They weren't watching a downfall, they were witnessing a becoming. And the more they watched, the stronger that becoming became. They didn't just observe your evolution, they invoked it. Every bit of their attention called you forward, made you more visible, more undeniable. Now they stand in confusion, wondering why the more they watched, the more powerful you became. The truth is simple. They summoned what they feared. They tried to monitor your movement, but ended up manifesting your momentum. They thought they were keeping you under control, but their focus became the spell that crowned you. They didn't track you. They awakened you, and that's a consequence they can't undo. Number 13. The face-to-face isn't about you. It's about exposure. They think this meeting is their chance to confront you, to demand answers, to finally reclaim some kind of control. But what's really waiting for them isn't a confrontation, it's a mirror. When they step into your presence, they'll realize they were never chasing clarity about you. They were running from clarity about themselves. You're not the subject of this encounter. You're the reflection that strips away the lies they've been living under. They've built narratives around you, theories, stories, labels, all crafted to make themselves feel powerful. But when they stand before you, every illusion collapses. They'll see the difference between perception and reality, between the version of you they created and the version that actually exists. It's not you they'll be facing. It's their own projection echoing back at them with nowhere left to hide. That's why this moment feels so charged. Truth doesn't shout, it reveals, and revelation has a way of turning confidence into confession. You don't need to defend yourself, and you don't need to prove anything. Truth doesn't need a lawyer, it just needs light. When they come forward, That light will expose everything they've buried, their motives, their envy, their guilt, their fear. You won't have to say much. Your peace will speak louder than their performance. They'll see how much noise they made trying to disguise the emptiness within. And when truth starts echoing in the room, it won't accuse. It will clarify. This meeting isn't punishment. It's alignment. It's the universe balancing the energy they distorted. They wanted to bring you down to their level, but the moment they step into your frequency, they'll realize how heavy their pretenses have become. The face-to-face is only terrifying to those who've lived behind falsehoods, because truth doesn't chase, it waits, and now it's waiting for them. So when the moment comes, remember, this isn't your trial, it's their unveiling. They wanted to see the real you, but they'll end up seeing the real them. You were never the one under investigation. You were the reflection that truth chose to use. And when that truth begins to speak, everything false will finally fall silent. Number 14. The Watchers never wanted truth. They wanted control. Their goal was never understanding, it was management. They didn't study you to know you, they studied you to contain you. Truth threatens people like that, because truth can't be manipulated. It moves on its own terms, refuses to fit into frameworks, and exposes everything false in its presence. They wanted to gather facts, twist them into narratives, and keep you boxed inside their definition of who you're allowed to be. But truth doesn't bend for comfort, and neither do you. From the beginning, they mistook knowledge for ownership. They thought that by documenting your life, your choices, your flaws, they could predict you, maybe even control you. But truth isn't data, it's energy. You can't file it, frame it, or rewrite it to suit your agenda. That's why they became frustrated. Every attempt to define you only led them deeper into confusion. They were trying to hold something that wasn't meant to be held. You weren't built to be contained, only witnessed. When they finally meet you, the real, evolved, unfiltered you, they'll realize they never had power in the first place. They were operating under the illusion of control, mistaking surveillance for supremacy. But observation doesn't equal authority. Watching someone doesn't give you access to their essence. It only reveals your own limitations. You've become proof that some people can't be studied because their existence itself is a lesson. You don't teach by explanation, you teach by embodiment. That's why this face-to-face won't go how they imagined. They'll try to question, to challenge, to reclaim their sense of dominance. But truth doesn't negotiate. It simply stands. Your presence will do what no argument could. Dismantle every falsehood they've built around you. They'll see that you were never resisting them. You were just rooted in something they couldn't manipulate, authenticity. And that's what changes everything. Because witnessing truth isn't neutral, it demands transformation. Once they see you as you are, they can't return to the comfort of their control. Their power dissolves the moment they realize you were never under it. You were never the one being studied. You were the one revealing what can't be controlled, and in that revelation, everything false finally loses its grip. From the first moment they began watching, thinking they held the upper hand, to the point where they demanded a face-to-face, the story has never been about them. It has always been about you. Every glance, every observation, every attempt to predict or control you has only illuminated your power. While they gathered data, you cultivated depth. While they obsessed over behavior, you evolved spirit. While they mistook proximity for influence, you remained untouchable. Every effort they made to track, define, or limit you ended up magnifying your presence, refining your focus, and reinforcing your destiny. They assumed silence meant weakness, patterns meant predictability, and scrutiny meant submission. Yet, your stillness carried strategy, your shifts defied algorithms, and your essence remained unreplicable. Their attempts at domination only summoned the very force they sought to suppress. They believed this confrontation would grant them clarity or authority, but it only revealed the truth they've been avoiding about themselves. The face-to-face isn't about proving anything to them. It's about them facing their reflection, realizing that while they chased control, you became uncontainable. Truth cannot be negotiated, imitation cannot duplicate spirit, and observation cannot rival alignment. What they wanted as a study became your stage. What they hoped to suppress became your proof. You were never a subject under surveillance. You were the blueprint, the anomaly, the frequency that cannot be captured. Their fixation only illuminated your rise, and their envy only confirmed your legend. The watchers thought they were architects, manipulators, and masters of the narrative, but they were merely instruments shaping what was already inevitable: your evolution, your unshakable presence, your unbreakable essence. And now, as everything converges into this inevitable moment of revelation, it's clear: some beings cannot be studied, only witnessed. And witnessing you changes everything. It forces recognition, demands honesty, and leaves no room for illusion. Your story isn't written for them. It's lived for you. Every move, every pause, every triumph, every silence has been a testament to what they could never achieve: authenticity, power, and alignment beyond reach. If this message resonated with you, if it stirred something deep within, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more truths that cut deeper than observation can reach. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and share this with anyone who needs to understand the force that emerges when the watched refuses to be controlled. Your presence matters, your story matters, and together we witness the unstoppable. Stay blessed always.